Hey friends, I'm coming to you with a late night post, which I have not done for quite some time. Doing my post right before I go to bed because I've had a day that's just been one thing after the next. We had a beautiful memorial today for a very close friend, and it was something that I've noticed, and I've actually had some other people have pointed this out too. When someone passes away, it's like all of a sudden, my mom said something about when someone passes away, then their life gets folded into a book. And I had this image of life kind of going along, like maybe every day is a page or something, and there's this kind of like this book is just being built, and it's just this flutter of papers just kind of going, being a stack of papers being stacked or leafed together, blown together by the wind. And then when they pass away, two book covers just kind of go shoo, and they press it into a book. And that's really what it feels like, because all of a sudden, chapters of someone's life even chapters that are 25, 30 years long start to look like just chapters. They take a place in a fixed temporal time frame, and it's like suddenly we can see how short time really is. I talked to people today who I hadn't seen since it might have been since I was a child, since I was like 8 or 7 years old. And it felt like, not like we saw each other yesterday, but it felt like, oh yeah, we're still friends. We have this weird connection that has somehow traversed nearly 40 years, but has retained a sense of significance. And I think in many ways, maybe that's one of the parting gifts that people who pass away bestow upon us, is a new perspective on time. Perspective on time where we really see how short time is. And which, taken, correctly, that should provoke us to live our lives to the fullest, not put off taking the steps or taking the leaps that we want to be taking, or even just spending the time every day, even just doing. It doesn't always have to be, I'm gonna completely change my life and blow everything up and do something new. It can just be investing our energy every single day the way we know that we want to be investing it. So much came through today about, I was sitting in the pews listening to the homily, and I thought of Sadhguru's statement that we should always be making any plans we make for our lives, and anytime we think about our lives, we should do so within the context of our mortality. And I was like, this is what he's talking about. It was a lovely poem that was read today. It was really bizarre because I had a thought come into my head, and then immediately the next person who stood up read this poem. The thought that came into my head was, the fear of death, I kept having this experience of standing, sitting, right? We were in church. And my body just wanted to open. It was like my heart wanted to open. Everything wanted to just crack open and be completely available for whatever wanted to come through. And I had this flash where I was like, the fear of death is the only thing we really need to deal with. If we can actually face that, and I've spoken a little bit about how over the last several months, it's not like my life has been threatened, but I've had some injuries, I've had some experiences that have sort of blown me back a little bit and made me reevaluate, made me, I think, just more conscious of the fact that I'm not invincible. My life is not going to go on forever, and so I'm mortal. That's my big epiphany of the last several months. I am actually a mortal human being. Getting really deep. But that's only, I'm being tongue-in-cheek about it, but it's actually not so easy to really feel that in every moment. Much of the time, I'll speak for myself, but much of the time, I am living in a state of mind that is not connected to my immortality. And so then every once in a while, when that idea pops up, it's horrifying, it's scary, it's shocking. But I imagine today, I was like, what if I just lean into that? What if I just never forget that this is a temporary arrangement? What if I know that all the time? Wouldn't that really, the phrase that popped into my head is, when we accept death, and thereby eradicate the fear of death, then the fear of death can no longer masquerade as other things. Because that's what's happening. Our fear of death is masquerading as other things that we're afraid of in our life. Not being successful enough, not finding the right relationship, not having the relationship work out, not being whatever to whomever, or achieving whatever. All of it is an underlying unconscious fear of our impermanence hooking itself onto a variety of different convenient objects. But if we deal with the fear of death and just live always in a present moment acceptance of that, so all our other fears would immediately go away. Because those other fears, even if they're legitimate concerns, don't need to involve any fear. They can just be problems to be solved, and most likely they're pretty easy. But you add the fear of death to them, and they seem immediately overwhelming, immediately beyond any sort of viable solution. So then, this is the thought that had popped in my head. I just had the thought about when we deal with our fear of death, and or when we accept death, or when we live in a state of total acceptance, then the fear of death can no longer masquerade as all of our other fears. The next woman who stood up read a poem called See Paris First. And it's all about how if Paris were the place where all your darkest fear, you knew that in Paris is where your darkest fears and your death lay. So in other words, if you stepped foot in Paris, you'd face your own mortality. The poem sort of takes you through this journey where it's like you definitely wouldn't want to put your feet on that city line, on the city limits. In fact, for good measure, you might stay out of France. In fact, even the borders of France might start to seem like they were a little too close, and you'd feel your fear enveloping the globe again. And the poem ends with, so what you need is a good friend who understands your secret and encourages you to see Paris first, take you right there, plop you in the middle of your fear of death, and then go on a world tour. But don't go on a world tour because you're avoiding Paris. And it's a beautiful poem. I need to find out what it is and actually learn the words to it. But that's the gist. And it was a perfect fit for for the thought that had just come into my head. So I could tell I was tuned into the spirit of the moment. But it's remarkable. It's remarkable that that's something we don't think about that often. You know, watching a loved one pass away is such an opportunity to see that. It's such an opportunity to see that, because what if we could just embrace that reality all the time, and then live, and then from that place of not avoiding anything, decide what to do with our lives. So it was a beautiful event. Really beautiful. And it's sad to watch a friend go, for sure. And I do have a song that I'll share, but not tonight. Thanks, people. I appreciate you. Have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow.